information about tests prior.
Yeah, we didn't want to tell people we were afraid of low enrollment or low registration information. So, okay, well, sure. So it is 5 after, and hey Beth, they've let us know that they've started recording, so thank you all for coming. My name is Mark Walker. I've been at this university since 1998. I work in the Office of Information Technology. My experience has all been hands-on since my days back at the Gap in the early 90s. I've taken a lot of classes through School of Extended Studies, some of their HR and project development classes and conflict resolution. But my co-presenter today, Ashley, is actually had on-the-ground, rubber hits the road training as well as actual HR formal education. So why don't you talk a little about it?
Again, my name is Ashley, and I work over in Campus Rec. I've been at Portland State for just over a year now, so it's been exciting and fun. Like Mark, a lot of my experience has also been hands-on. I started in the food industry. My dad has a restaurant, and so we've been raised with customer service in the food industry. I've also worked at the Gap. I've gotten a lot of structure and foundation from their training, and I've also been a director at the YMCA where I was able to apply that training and coach young individuals on customer service. So with all that, I was able to wrap up some training PowerPoints for Campus Rec, and it's been very successful.
So as you can see, we've got some documents in front of you. Those are self-assessments. We're kind of going to switch kind of back and forth between the two of us today over our objectives for this group. Ashley and I are both very open, and this is a very flexible group. So if you have questions, just ask them. You don't need to wait till the end or anything. We're just going to go over different topics as we go along. And I'll go ahead and hand it over to Ashley now.
Sure. So just to cover our learning objectives today, number 1, understand who you supervise. Number 2, define customer service as a team. And number 3, get the tools to accomplish a good customer service team. So at this point, I think I've got around close to 30 students. And it's been a long process of really getting to hire a solid customer service team. We serve about 3,000 patrons per day. So what I've really realized is that it's so important to really know who you're hiring, to make sure they're educated on your mission, your values, and they know exactly what the job entails. And so my first hiring session, I didn't spend too much time in training, and I learned that that really affects how it all operates down the line. So my second and third hiring session, I've put a lot of hours into training. And so going into these assessments that are in front of you, I've actually incorporated both of these right when someone is hired. And just to go back a little bit with the mission and the values, as part of my hiring process and the interview process, the very first thing I want to know about these students is how they reflect Campus Rec, the mission, the values, and how they reflect Portland State mission and values. And so I really want them to know that right from the beginning, right before we dive into, how are you prepared for this job and what kind of skills do you have. So right from the interview process, that has been very helpful to make sure that they know who we're serving and what we want to accomplish. And then after they're hired, as their supervisor, I want to know how they learn, how I'm going to train them. And so you have a Kolb. Is anybody familiar with Kolb? He's got a learning inventory style of, he's got a model here in which you take the test and then you figure out how you learn and how you want to be trained. So as their supervisor, that's been very helpful for me. And then it also goes into communication. Not everybody communicates the same way. And this has also been very helpful for the students and myself. So that way I know if I need to get some particular topic across or I need to change a procedure or a policy, I know how to communicate with these student employees individually. So that's been very, very helpful. Another way I get to know my students, and I put a lot of time into this, and I really invest in their goals, what they want out of life. Because what this does, this helps me essentially, if they want to go into a particular field, I know that I can give them tasks that's going to relate to that certain field. And I also, it's good to keep students accountable for what their goals are. It's kind of, you're touching them in a way that is outside of the workplace. So this has been very helpful for me, and a lot of my students said that they actually enjoy filling this out. Yes, Joelle?
Do you share these goals, like within a group at staff meetings?
I do. I actually give them the option if they want, because some of these goals are very personal, and so if they want to share their goals with others, we do share them in groups. Sometimes we put them on our bulletin boards. It's actually really interesting to see some people have similar interests and goals, and that's something they usually wouldn't talk about. So we do share these with other groups in the department, and we share them within my group, Member Services. So it depends on, what their students want and also what your goals are. So,
And to just talk about hiring for a second, how many knows, I graduated from here basically focusing on art history and film as being the really prevalent piece of art that still represents the society that you're watching. And how many have heard a director say that 90% of their job is doing the right casting? That if they've got the right actors in the roles, then 90% of the work is done. That's the same way during the hiring process. It tends to be something that we tend to do when we're pressed for time, when we're rushed. We're not investigating if we're asking the right questions. We're not finding out enough about the people we're hiring, and it's much easier to hire someone and take that extra time during the hiring process to make sure you've got enough applicants, that you're asking the right questions, that you've got your job posted clearly, a very good job description at the Career Center, and you've got all of that data in there. So when you interview people, you've already filtered out people who are not going to meet your expectations. As the guy who supervises employees who work in the AV office, who support rooms like this, and as the guy who supervises the computer labs, I'm looking for two very different types of skill sets in terms of customer service. And when I go to an interview, and I have an a potential candidate, and we say, what do you hope to get out of this job? And the employee's applying for a lab attendant to go, well, it'd be great to have a job where I can sit and browse the internet all day long and, not do anything. Well, you're raising some red flags for me already. That's probably someone I'm not particularly motivated to hire. But if you hire, it's the week before the term starts, and you're in a pinch, and that person's got great availability, you're kind of setting yourself up for someone who's going to be more work down the line. So it is really important to look at the questions you're asking, make sure you're getting information from your candidates, open-ended questions they can't answer with yes or no, and find out exactly like Ashley's saying, what their goals and objectives are, and let them know what your expectations are from them, and then you can kind of see if they're going to be able to match with that, or if they're in the wrong, if they're applying for the wrong position.
Exactly, and another thing on our list is strengths. The way I approach leadership is strengths-based, and I also try to work on what students want to improve on, and maybe what you think they should improve on and you would suggest. But strengths-based leadership is really helpful for me because it allows me, like, for example, I know what my weaknesses are, and I work hard to overcome those weaknesses, but I also know that there are better students out there that I supervise that actually do a better job at maintaining a lot of, in my case, detail-oriented tasks, something that is probably not my strong suit. So rather than trying to focus on always trying to improve that person who may not have this personality and is very vibrant and open to people, but they may be very good at those details and getting the job done, focus on that strength and use that to your ability and getting the job done. That has been very helpful for me. And that also allows them to feel empowered. So that's it. Yeah.
Any questions about, what kind of questions do you have about the hiring process or finding your candidates? Everyone here familiar with using the Career Center? Show of hands. Who uses the Career Center for posting job positions? Okay. How many of you start hiring by show of hands a month before school starts in September? 3 weeks? 2 weeks? 1 week? Okay. So, yeah, I mean, for all of us, we have to determine what our hiring needs are, whether we're doing work study only, whether we're hiring anyone. But that is the part of the supervisory process that does get short-handed the most, that often ends up hurting you in the end the most and costing you more time later. So, how would all of you define customer service? Since we're supposed to be training people for customer service, what is that? How is it defined in all of your areas? Martha, what would good customer service be in your area?
Exceeding expectations before the customer even knows they have that expectation.
Okay, so for you it'd be, and what kind of customers are you working with? Tell us a little bit about what your student would be doing.
I work with international students that come from Japan, Korea, China for short-term programs, and they're just coming to America. They don't know all of the logistic things that happen behind the scenes. So that's my job, is to have everything set up from the bus that picks them up at the airport to the bus that takes them back to the airport, and everything runs smoothly in between.
So you've got a lot of logistical organizational things
Absolutely.
they're doing. Now, how much of that are your student workers doing as part of their customer service?
Student workers are doing the day-to-day facilitation of what I've done before the program.
So Jared, how would you define customer service for user support services?
Quickly and accurately answering any question that comes to us in, a nice, friendly, and useful way.
Okay, so timely communication with the clients. Okay, how about you, Beth? All right, you don't have to answer. Yeah, no. So Michael, what would be customer service in your
I think just being respectful of different knowledge or skill levels when it comes to computer use and application use. My students are dealing with a wide variety of faculty, staff, students, so you just need to understand that not everybody's going to be an expert and treat them with respect.
Okay. So treating people with respect, listening to them, and making sure they have the knowledge to be able to do their jobs. So I've got the whole auxiliary services contingent over here. So Carrie, how would you define customer service for auxiliary services?
Customer service for auxiliary services, to me, is basically us doing anything that the clients ask.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's about accommodating and meeting their needs. Okay. Great. So anyone else have any ideas? So Nick, I just met Nick today. Nicholas, how would you define customer service for your area?
I think fostering hospitality and really making the space warm and welcoming for people to come in, because I do work in the learning center, so the whole point is to provide that atmosphere where learning can happen and happen effectively. So I think just maintaining that air of hospitality and comfort is important.
Okay. So I'm hearing a lot about facilitation, accommodation, communication. So and then meeting clients' needs, and that's pretty universal for all of us. I think the trick with a university like ours, at least from my perspective, as someone who, we do hire, because we're not limited to work study, we hire a lot of international students too, is making sure that we're hiring to do those things, to look at accommodation, to look at customer service from that perspective, to meet clients' needs and to answer their questions quickly. To kind of give you just a little bit about the Audiovisual Services Office, when I first started working here, we had about 20 high-tech classrooms on campus. We now have 120 high-tech classrooms on campus. And when I first worked here, the AV employees sat there and they checked out DVD and VCRs all day long. And they really never left the AV office. We're in a whole different world now. As soon as I assumed responsibility for managing the AV office in addition to the computer labs, I retrained those employees and I set some clear expectations for them, which is really important. And one of the things that I did in our world was said, if someone calls you and they're in Kramer 53 or one of the classrooms and they're in distress, it's a faculty member they're trying to teach and they can't get the computer to show up on the projector, you can stay on the phone with them for about 30 seconds, but after 30 seconds, you get up and you run to their room. You're not going to sit there and pull a Air Force One, okay, cut the green wire, not the blue wire, scenario with a faculty member who's already stressed out because they've got 200 students staring at them, not understanding why they can't work the technology. So our expectation is to get up and run to their room. So how would you, so you're saying you've got these accommodation, communication, responding to clients. How do you express those desires and needs to the students when you hire them? Joelle?
Can I have a minute to
Sure,
think?
sure. Who would like to, anyone have any thoughts on how you try to get your students to, how do you transmit that to them? Molly?
Well, I think the best way for us in the library at the circulation desk with, not only is it quick transactions with checking out books, but it sort of serves as an information desk for the whole campus. So just imparting that they'll be doing a lot more than like the basic job they signed up for. And not saying no is really important, or I don't know, but saying, let me find out for you, or let me grab a staff person.
That's a lot like our world. Working in OIT, there's a lot more I don't know than I do know. But then I know that I can usually find the right answer from that guy sitting over there usually. Or someone in OIT, because that world's just too large and too expansive now.
Well, I know for us at Campus Rec, it's as simple as knowing the person's name and asking a question beyond their, just, hi, how are you? And so because of that, we've built this sense of community, and they feel at home. It's their second home, and so that is the number one mandate when I hire is, you need to know these people on another level somehow. So that's really.
So I think the trick is, I've heard people talk about knowledge bases and accommodation communication. How do you hire for those skill sets? What have some of you been doing? Have you been succeeding, or you're struggling with it? Because the trick in OIT is we do have to balance, as I'm sure all of us do, hiring someone who's got the right kind of approach toward customer service, someone who's not going to struggle with that, as opposed to someone who has the other skill sets requisite for the position. I'm sure when Jared hires someone in user support services, they can be as friendly as Ashley or I, but if you don't know how to rebuild a computer system, I probably shouldn't be applying there, right? So that's the trick in balancing all these positions. And that's always the line you have to look for, and that's where, again, going back to the Career Center and making sure that your requirements for the job before you even interview them, they're going to meet your know-how before you get there. I always tell our employees, particularly in the classroom audiovisual services world, I can train you how to do basic troubleshooting in a classroom. I can't train you to be naturally friendly. I can show you what we expect from customer service, and a lot of that is done through role modeling, and I know Ashley can talk more about that.
Role modeling.
Role modeling.
Okay. In our training, we go through various forms of scenarios of what we're probably going to see from certain patrons as they come in. And so you're going to have the happy patrons, and you're going to have the not-so-happy patrons. And so we go through various forms of role modeling and hypothetical situations over and over again so that they have a mental flow chart of exactly how they're going to handle certain circumstances. And so, or whether it just be, learning how to rebuild a computer. It's that mental flow chart. And so repetitive, repetitive, repetitive. And that way they know that there's an A, B, C, D way of handling a situation or particular task. In the way I train, we do a lot of pair and share, get together, here's your situation, what would be your way of handling the situation, or what would be your way of building this computer. That way you can assess their knowledge, and then we share it, and then we either critique it as a group or support them as a group. So that's been very helpful.
For CAVS, what we do is we have a full one day that actually this next year is going to be developed into a 2-day training session that's about the second week in September, where we train all of our employees together. I had a video to kind of show what they do. Our employees, we encourage them to be proud of the work they do. We haven't really shown an increase, particularly in the number of students we're allowed to have working for us and compared to the number of classrooms they're now supporting. So they really do a phenomenal job. And usually during that training we talk about the mission statements and goals of our entire group, what our expectations are, but we also allow employees who've been here for a while to shine. And you've all heard, how many people have heard the phrase, catch your employees doing things right? So the trick is when you see employees who are meeting your expectations, that for me, that's again one of those things that often gets overlooked, is taking the time to recognize them publicly, recognize them in front of their peers. I know, for example, not to call them out on the spot, we have a new coordinator working in the technology classrooms and labs team that we're working with, and he's doing a phenomenal job. So when we have those bi-weekly meetings, as the leader of that group, I point out to everyone else, I go, I'd just like to thank, this person for doing a phenomenal job. The last 2 weeks has been very challenging, and his communication has been exceptional, and his follow-up and triage has been exceptional. And I say that in front of the whole team. Now, if I have someone who's not meeting my expectations, should I be doing that in that TLC meeting? How many people think you should? Nope? Oh, that's good. Okay, see, I'm preaching to the choir here. Yeah, obviously, we call them corrective interviews in our group now. Obviously, corrective interviews need to be done as privately as possible so you maintain the integrity of the employees as well as yourself. How many people have listservs for the employees you're supervising? Anyone? A lot of you? The trick with those listservs, and this is a newbie mistake that I made too when I was a first coordinator, it's really easy to see something you don't like about the locations you're supervising and then just send out a nagging email to the entire team. And about 2 months into that, I had one of my best employees come up to me and go, you know what, I really don't like reading your emails anymore because you're always just complaining about stuff. Well, the best employees shouldn't be reading about me complaining about something they didn't even do. So it's important to narrow it down to the behavior performance issues you don't like, and then talk to those employees individually and find out from them, is there some reason you're not meeting this expectation? Now, I'm going to throw you for a little bit of a curve here. Sorry, Ashley. Is if you look at the back of this training for customer service document, on the back here, there's this list. I recently was in a conflict resolution course, and this came up. It's from Ferdinand Fornes. I'm probably butchering his name, but it's why employees don't do what they're supposed to do. And this was a survey done for 4,000 people asking why they didn't do their jobs. And this kind of lists the things that as supervisors we should really be looking for to make sure we address these with our employees. They didn't know why they should do it. This goes back to Ashley and the missions and goals of your organization. Why should they be doing something? Why is it important for them to communicate with a client? If they don't understand that communicating with a client is important for your customer service, if you can't explain that to them, that's a problem. How many of you remember when you were 3 and your mom said, do this thing because I said so? How well did that work? Right? Doesn't work. It doesn't work with employees either. If they understand why something's important, they're more likely to invest in it themselves.
And they need a sense of purpose.
That's
most important.
Yeah, absolutely. They didn't know when to begin or end it, so we haven't set clear expectations. They didn't know what they were supposed to do, so they didn't have a clear expectation of what they were supposed to do. They didn't know how to do it. They hadn't been trained enough to know what they were supposed to do. 5, they thought they were doing it, so someone hadn't let them know that they weren't quite meeting the expectation. 6, they thought their prescribed way wouldn't work or that their way was better. Let me talk about that one for a minute. When I hire new employees, I usually pull them aside and say, you know what? Our organization's been around for a long time. You have a fresh pair of eyes on our organization. If you see things that you think could be done better, we want to hear about it. You may have experiences from the outside world that can help us run things more efficiently, more smoothly, or have a better system of operation for something. We want to know about it. And those things often come into practice. The way the desk is organized up in the instructional computing classrooms was come up with by a student employee. He thought of it. It was fantastic. It works great. It's a much better setup than it was before. We let him know that. We let all the employees know that. They often come up with the best solutions for things, particularly all these kids coming in now who've grown up with technology their whole lives. Where for me, when I was 10, having a VCR was exciting. For them, they want an iPad 2 when they're 10.
Just to go off on that, the students that I work with, they're the ones who usually find the problems within the system. And so when they come to my office and they say, hey, we're out of so-and-so, or this is not working, or we need to change this, my first response is, well, what is your solution? Take ownership of it. This is something that I'm going to delegate to you, and I will look over it. But that's something that you can give them credit for, and then they can feel empowerment for that.
So We have a lot of smart student workers that are, when we have a lot of different problems, given that we have to solve lots of technical issues in many different ways. And recently I had a student worker come to me and say, wouldn't this be a better, organizational method? Wouldn't this be a better process for us? And my answer to him was that, design it, write it out, figure out how it's going to happen. But he was just like, well, why don't we just do it? So, like, how do you, imbue within other individuals the sense of, completeness that's necessary to, like, implement a complex process or to merge two organizational units together into, one work unit? Like, I just was sort of like, it's more complicated than that. And that was my only...
Well, and that's you're that information base. You know what it entails and what the obstacles could be. And so for me, it's like an educational piece. Like, yes, I want you to do it, but before we actually throw it out there, you need to know A, B, C, and D, and what's going to happen when this happens, and have you thought of this? And so take that all into consideration, see what they come up with, overview it, and then whether or not it works.
And sometimes organizationally, it's difficult to move, the organization, in a sense, in a good direction, beyond powers, even within our own realm of control. So sometimes you just have to say, sorry, we can't do that now. That's a fantastic idea. And it feels like in a lot of situations that ends up being the answer, because there's so much work on our plate and we don't have the ability to do that. So how do you keep from sort of disenchanting the workforce?
Yeah, I know in our experience, the trick is I tell our employees, again, when we're hiring them, say, you're going to come up with a lot of solutions, and we absolutely want to hear about those, and we will give them what I call due diligence. We will investigate them, and we will actually ask them to help us with those things, but also they need to understand the same way I can't make a decision for, the way the state board does something. There's things that they can do for their job that will impact their work. Kind of to go back to what Ashley was saying, I tend to tell my folks, you know what? I need to listen to you because you're on the front lines. You're the one who's sitting in the lab at 11 o'clock at Friday night who's telling me, you know what, I need a second lab attendant here, not because of the workload, but because I feel unsafe Friday night at 11 o'clock at an urban university. And I go, you're right, we're going to resolve that. And what we do with someone who wants to see changes that says organizationally we can do these things, you validate them and say, yeah, these things would be great, and I can certainly talk to our director about this. We need to develop it. But they also need to understand there are risks that things are going to get shot down. One of the questions we ask our coordinators, who are in the real world, you call them assistant managers. They're student employees that we promote to basically an assistant manager position. One of our questions for them is, you've spent weeks developing a project, and it's been turned down. How would you handle that? Because in this world, we're constantly coming up with ideas and proposals that we present to our supervisors, and some of them go up further, and some of them get shot down. And that's kind of the reality of working in any organization. The great thing here, another benefit to working at PSU, aside from having the same clients over and over again, I see your hand, I'll get you. No. Is that, we are dealing with the same clients for the most part over and over again, the same faculty, the same staff. I think Martha's situation is a little bit unique. You've got all these people who fly in every year. But our student employees are students, and a lot of them are here because they're getting professional skills in their classes, and as part of their professional development, particularly for a student who's in a business mode, say, you need to come up with a prospectus on this. You need to talk about what the risks are, what the benefits are, and if you can sell in your examples ahead on this, or Sharon on this, that's exciting. I know, for example, Jared, you came up with a system that you like for evaluating student employees so they can get performance appraisals, which went up to Jahed. He liked it, and then Sharon loved it. So these are the kind of things. But how many ideas have you had in the last 5 years that have been shot down? Dozens and dozens and dozens. So the trick is to let them know this is kind of a real-world test. When you have those ideas, the ones that can flourish, we're absolutely going to be there with you, and we're going to sing your praises. We're going to point you out in public when you come up with a great idea. But understand that a lot of times organizationally there's going to be where we don't have the ability to make these choices and make these decisions. And that's part of their professional development, which for student employees is I learned much more from my real-world jobs that's applied to my life honestly, than what I loved art history, but it hasn't really done anything for me career-wise.
Okay.
So back to this for a second. Did you have your hand up? No? So I think the idea is to encourage that, but set a realistic expectation that the larger the scope of the project, the more likely it is to get shot down at some upper level that you have no level of control over. They can still influence from below. I've often said, if you look at the way we're doing things, people higher ups in the organization are going to say, hey, we like the way you're running things. How are you doing that? And then you can influence them from the bottom up. And I say the same thing to the employees. If you've got a great system for something, tell us and we'll see if we can implement it. So back to this really quickly. They thought something else was more important. We've all kind of seen that one. They aren't rewarded for doing it or they're punished for not doing it. They are rewarded for not doing it or they're punished for doing it. How many of us have fantastic employees? And then the second we realize we've got a fantastic employee, we start throwing all the heavy burdens on them. Right? So the trick there is to make sure you're not punishing your employees for being skilled and competent. You look for ways to reward them, and sometimes that's not about wages. What are some ways you can reward your student employees without giving them a pay raise if you can't afford it? Any ideas? Carrie?
I have a customer service motivational chart that I have posted in our front office, and every time one of our student employees does a great job with customer service, they get a sticker. And the person with the most stickers at the end of the month gets to go down to the university market and spend $10 on me.
Food. I was going to say food is always a good reward.
Food is a good reward. JR?
My students at the end of each month vote on their peers to who's going to be the ambassador of the month, and then we take their picture and hang it on the wall so that they're recognized, and everybody in the university knows that, hey, they're March's ambassador of the month or January's ambassador of the month.
And as you know, JR is integral to the Student Employee of the Year award situation too, which we just had too. So there's lots of ways to recognize your employees. Maybe next time when you're doing the scheduling, if you've got two employees, one of them is stellar, one of them's just kind of chugging along, not doing anything horrible. You give the one who you can count on, who never calls in sick, who always works really hard. You don't find them playing solitaire on the computer. That's the employee you're going to give their preferred hours to over the employee who maybe you have to constantly check in with and go, could I get you to close your Kindle, please?
For me, every one of my students is a role model in something. So going back to role modeling and just always using them as an example when you were talking about that specific topic. And so, again, going back to strengths, so-and-so is really good at this. I'm going to remember that and give them credit when the time arises. So-and-so is really good at this. So when I talk about it, I'll say, like Joelle, I'm always going to be on time. Good job, Joelle. And then you're going to go into your thing. So that's another way where you don't really have, if you don't have the tangibles and the rewards and stuff like that, just always giving that credit is good for leadership.
And taking the time to thank them and thank them specifically. Don't just say, oh, thank you for doing such a good job. If you say, thank you so much for connecting me with Ashley for this presentation, I really appreciate it. I've really appreciated the extra connection I now have with another coworker on campus. And you take the time to tell them specifically why you like what they're doing. That tells them you're not just on autopilot and that they're just another cog in your system, but you actually appreciate their work. Jared?
Well, you had eliminated monetary reward out of there, but monetary reward, if you can give raises or if you're doing performance evaluations with some sort of metric, then you can give a gradient of reward. We also stole the idea from Campus Rec for the performance, or the one time you're doing really awesome raise that I think you had talked about in one of your things.
Exceptional employee.
Exceptional employee merit increase.
Yeah, we call it a praise raise when we wrote up our documentation, just because it's kind of quirky and short. But so we implemented that. I haven't actually given any away because I've only been authorized to that for a month so far. But I think that's another definitely valid way. Most people can squeeze in a dime here or something for somebody totally kicking butt.
So to go, I feel like we've gone on a million different tangents, and I blame, frankly, myself for that because Ashley's very good at. But I would say I think the trick in my world, because I am supervising about 100 110 employees at any given time, and I do have 3 staff who supervise them with me, that they're one level of management in between us, is that the trick is to have a really solid, constantly up for updates, SOP, standard operating procedure. We give those to our employees when we initially hire them. We take the time to go over with them, and again, we tell employees, go, you know what, you're brand new, you're going to look at this and go, this makes sense to me, or oh, this part really doesn't, or I'm struggling with this part of the SOP, or this part I like, and that's exactly the kind of feedback we need from new employees. And I've told everyone with our SOP, if there's not a policy in here that I can defend, that means it probably needs to change. You know, with the exception of the policies and procedures that are in there because they're legal things, then it's up for revision. If you don't like the way we unlock classrooms every morning, if you have a better way, it's up for revision. If I can't tell you why we're doing it a certain way, we're doing it. One of the reasons I'm in this group is because I was recruited by HR to join JR's group, and we are working on a handbook for the entire campus that's going to have some of these SOP guidelines in it. We don't know when that's going to be done, but that's what we've been working on. But it is really important to set clear expectations for your employees. And if you have employees who are constantly faltering in certain points of your SOP or your proposal, ask yourself how much of that is them and how much is that are you not being clear in your expectations. And when employees are not performing some aspect of their job correctly, bring them in. Find out why they're not doing it right. It may be something that system's not working for them. You haven't adapted to the learning style, which Ashley was talking about, and you taught them in a way that doesn't work for them. You know, I have employees, we have little online video tutorials for them, you know, in the labs, how to deal with, you know, users who try to hit on them, which has not been an uncommon problem on campus, and other issues. But if there's things a lot of people are finding fault with, that's something that probably is a red flag to me that there's something in our SOP that's not quite working for people and that it needs to change. And that's where it's really important to be listening to your employees. It's become a cliche, but I always tell my employees during that all-day long training in mid-September, you know what, I never can pay you what you're worth, but I hope to treat you like what you're worth. And that even goes for the worst employee. The worst employee is still going to have my time. I'm still going to sit them down in my office and find out, okay, these are the behaviors I've noticed that are a concern to me. I'm noticing that you're ignoring customers. I'm noticing that someone can be in this computer lab and the projector's still on after the class is over, and these are things I'm concerned about. Is there something you need from us so you can accomplish this in your job? What do you need to succeed here? And that needs to be the goal. I don't do corrective sessions with my employees so I can terminate them. They're called correctives for us because I want to, the goal for both of us is to improve their performance or to figure out if possibly this job might not be the right fit for them. That's kind of our goal with our SOP and our training. We will give them the knowledge to do their job, but we can't give them the ambition to do it. We can simply tell them what our goals and hopes and aspirations are and make sure that they align with theirs based on what Ashley was talking about earlier, making sure you've hired the right people.
And even if they don't work and they do not fit, it's not this blaming, you don't work for us. They're still getting something out of it. They're realizing that, you know what, this might not be my area of expertise. It goes back to them. What are my strengths? Perhaps I should apply for this job or this job. And that's something that you can suggest as well. You know, you're really good at this. You should look into this department because I know they need these types of people. So that extra follow-up, right, you know, it's not just a termination, here's your paperwork. Follow up with them because that's what we're here for, is to make sure that they actually successfully get through college.
And even if you let them go, an important thing to remember is that they're still going to be on campus. When there are the occasions that I let someone go, I say, you know what, we will be perfectly happy to see you in the labs and make it perfectly clear to them, I'm not mad at you. I just think this job was not the right fit for you, but we'll be perfectly happy to see you in the labs, and I don't want you to have any, I don't want you to think there's any hard feelings on our side about your leaving our employment. So what kind of questions do all of you have about training for customer service? Have we beaten you in submission, Joelle?
What kind of questions do you ask during the interview to draw out from the candidate their customer service and their...
Well, for me, when you want to know why they're qualified for the job, Campus Rec is a perfect example. We get a lot of applicants that come in and say, I just love to work out. That's not what I'm looking for. Everybody likes to work. A lot of people like to work out. And so for me specifically is those key words that you're looking for in the experience that directly relates to the job at hand. So that's one question. Number two, right away, I focus in on the mission. I want to know where their heart is, where the passion is for the job, and how they're going to use those skills and that passion with everyone else. Number three, I'd like to know diversity questions. What is their experience with diversity, even if they don't have that diversity experience? What have they taken away from their time at Portland State? So those are the top three for me.
The other easy questions, it's not even the questions, it's how the interview goes. If you're hiring for customer service and that customer service involves face-to-face interaction with clients, how did you feel about the interview process? Did they show up on time for the interview? If you have a job, I have a job where I need my employees to get to work by 7 a.m. It's critical. We unlock all 120 classrooms on this campus. If you don't think I have drama when someone doesn't show up for work, you're wrong, because that means I'm out there with an umbrella unlocking Science Building 1 and 2 myself. So if I have someone who shows up late for an interview, and timeliness is important to me, that person just didn't get the job. They can interview really well, but if they showed up late, yeah, I'm not so sold. But again, if you're dealing with front face-to-face customer service, things to look for in an interview: did this person make good eye contact? Did they have a pleasant demeanor? Did they represent an optimistic perspective, or were they, well, I'm looking for a paycheck, and I really like that I can come and I'll be paid to browse the internet all day long and bid on things on eBay. Again, it goes back to how they answer the questions and making sure you just don't answer yes or no. And asking them tough questions that are realistic to your jobs. I know for auxiliary services, how do you feel about being notified at the last minute that you're going to need to work on Sunday because there's going to be an all-day event with Kitzhaber here? Right? If you have an employee who's like, you know what, I think that would really bother me, I don't like that. How do you feel about setting up furniture? Oh, no thank you. I mean, it's asking the kind of questions that are going to apply to their job and not painting the job as a rosy picture. I think auxiliary services has a very challenging role in my experience working with the event team of people need to go with the flow, they need to accommodate, and they get hit by curveballs all day long. If you've got someone who doesn't cope well with change and on-the-fly, last-minute accommodation, it's probably the wrong fit. For us, talking about Ashley's playing people's strengths, computer labs are a good place for someone who maybe doesn't need curveballs, who's doing the same thing. Oh, it's been another 25 minutes, I need to go do a round, I need to make sure I've done all my tasks, I need to make sure the lab is clean and present, I need to make sure the printers are good. That person can work there. They shouldn't be working for event services because they don't want to find out at 2 o'clock that Jeff Merkley's coming and he's going to be over here. Not a good fit. So those are the kind of questions. Ask yourself, what are those tough questions that your employees get hit with now? And then ask those tough questions during the interview, and people will self-select out of your process.
Slightly tangential, but Brian Myers, your AV manager, had a good one where his question was at the very start of any interview is, what are you applying to, and why do you want to be in this job? And if they don't know what they're applying to, which a lot of people, I guess, on the career side just sort of spam the same resume out to everybody, he simply says, if they're just way off base or they have no idea, he's just like, thank you for your time, I appreciate you coming in, and then ends the interviews, not to waste his time, his coordinator's time.
I'm going to hand it back to Ashley here for 1 second. Another thing that the AV services team does, what I would recommend other people do, if they need to have some level of skill set that you want to know they have an aptitude for already, in AV what we do is actually when we interview candidates, part of that interview process is actually an aptitude test. We bring in a projector on a cart with a DVD player and a laptop, and we go connect these items and make it project out of the projector. When we trained for our CAVS techs, the team that now supports these 120 classrooms, we actually set up problems with the technology during the interview, and then we say, make this work, and they have to figure it out because those are the baseline. And if they don't already have an aptitude for those things, it's going to probably take too much of my time trying to explain that what an RCA cable is versus what a VGA is. If you don't know what a VGA is and you want to be a CABS tech, our job's probably not the right fit for you. So I saw a hand up and now I've lost. Oh, back there.
I was just going to say that I think one thing that's very powerful in interviews, especially in regards to customer service, is situational questions. So asking for a very specific example, and often you'll get a response that is something to the effect of, well, what I would do is this, this, and this. And it's like, okay, well, can you give me a specific example? Because somebody that has a lot of customer service will be able to pull from some example where they had somebody that was irate and how they dealt with them. And then that gives you an idea of, their problem-solving skills as well.
Didn't you have some examples, Ashley?
Well, I do.
Yeah.
But with those examples are perfect, because then I ask them, I follow up with that. How is your emotional intelligence and how is your social intelligence? And how do they define both of those? Emotional intelligence is your self-awareness, right? How did you react emotionally to that situation? Were you calm? Were you professional? Social intelligence, how well do you know the people that you're serving? And so I do those situational-based questions, and then I ask them with a follow-up on those two specific things.
I also like to ask questions regarding, tell me about a time something went wrong, and what did you learn and take away from that experience? Because, first of all, nobody is perfect, so just about everybody's going to have an example. And then how they improved on that shows a lot. I mean, it's okay for somebody to do something wrong. We're not all perfect, but...
Right. Rather than saying, like, what's your weakness? I hate that. I just hate that question. I say, I do the same thing. What was a time where you messed up on something, and how did you solve that? How did you react from that? So that's a very good question.
We will often ask the question, describe to me a previous customer service challenge you had, and how would you change it to go to... It is... I always lose your name. It's Christine, right? Christina. That's, you ask those kind of questions in your interviews. We ask questions because, again, for the labs, timeliness is important. You just went to go get in your car to drive into work, and you realize you've got a flat tire and you're not going to get here. What would you do? We want to see if the person has the kind of emotional intelligence to be able to handle the situation, but also we have the question, a faculty member is scheduled to teach in Newburgh 450 at 3 o'clock. At 2:45, you go in there to set up the room and realize the projector won't turn on. What would you do? Or you've had a situation where a faculty member is irate and mad and they're screaming at you. How would you respond to that? That's a question we usually ask all of our coordinators, because you will have a situation where someone's very stressed out and they will take it out on you as the person who's there on the front line. In those situations, I usually end up praising my employees for dealing with that tough situation, and then I follow up with a faculty member and address the situation. But those are the kind of questions you have to ask. Again, I always think to the situations that auxiliary services gets put in, where you're going to have people who don't, I want to have 18 wireless microphones for my guitars on Saturday, and I want to run this streaming, and I blah, blah, blah. And you have to work to accommodate them, but also kind of set realistic expectations, and you get used to telling them no, but why? But those are the questions to kind of put to your crew when someone walks in on Saturday and they're yelling at your crew because they wanted square tables and they don't understand how come they got round ones instead. And how do you process that and not just lash out back at the client?
During the hiring process, do you guys use tools or metrics to try to correlate all the people interviewing to a final decision? Because I know we have a lot of really young people that come in and apply, and not a lot of them have experience, but some of them have great energy or great personality or seem like they're going to be really good in those, in your environment or whatever. So how do you tease that out, but not, if they have no previous experience, how are they going to have resolved a crazy customer service experience? Do you have tools or methods?
I always hire someone that I know is going to get a lot out of this job. So I don't always hire the best candidates. I mean, I hire as many as I can, but I always hire one or two within my group that I know can get a lot out of the job. And I also know how much time it's going to take me to train these specific green newbies to get where I expect them to be. And so your question was,
Well, if you have a
Just-
candidate pool of 10 candidates and like 2 are highly experienced, 2 are extremely motivated but completely green, how do you make that final decision? Is it all just gut? Do you guys use tools or matrices?
I have the spirit. I'm so glad you brought that up, Joelle.
Campus Direct, we use Spirit for performance evaluations and for hiring.
So this is what we base our evaluations off of. And so, you know, a lot of people are going to come in with great skills. So some of those are no-brainers, like, yep, this person's going to make the job real easily. Lots of the newbies come in, how, you know, like, what is their passion like for the job? How bad do they want it? Do they know what they want to get out of it? I don't have skills in this. I would really like a lot more interaction with customers so I can get this out of it and this out of it. Initiative, they may not know a lot, but they're going to do it when they're asked. They're going to think of self-projects that they can do on their own. For me, it's the people who just stand up, start folding towels, clean down the counters, stuff that need to be done without me asking. Will they show up on time? You know, they're trying to make this effort. So if I know that that passion is involved with all of these and interacting with people, then I go for it.
And the T in Spirit is trainability.
Oh, I'm sorry, I left one out. I'm sorry about that.
So yes, and then the T is trainability. Can we train this person to do the job that they've been hired for?
Right. The trick that we found is in that situation, I'm going to go with the person usually who's got the energy and the things you're seeing on there as opposed to someone who's got the native skill sets. If I've got someone who really wants to learn a lot about management who's applying for the coordinator position, I'm more interested in them than someone who already thinks they know the answer to every management question that's ever been answered, and they're not really willing to listen to me and doesn't have an interest in learning something new. It's hard to replace someone who's got a lot of self-initiative, and then you need to foster that. I think the answer to your question, how many of you regularly have check-in meetings with your employees? There's team meetings and there's individuals. I have found, honestly, that it's important to check in both with the great employees and with the ones who are not doing so well. And if you see employees that are struggling, don't wait 2 weeks or a month or 6 weeks to say, you know what, it's Thanksgiving and I haven't liked the way you performed all term long, and I just think that this isn't the right fit for you, and I'm going to let you go. As soon as it's kind of like that sign on the bus. I guess I'm a TriMet person enough. If you see something, say something. If you see an employee doing something that you would rather they do it a different way, when you get the opportunity shortly thereafter, pull them aside and say, this is what I saw, this is what I witnessed, this behavior, not you, but this behavior is one that I have a concern about, and this is what we would hope to do. And you give them the opportunity to change and to modify their behavior. And if that person does not modify that behavior and learn and is not trainable, then you need to address that with them next time and go, you know what, we had a check-in meeting about this. Your performance hasn't changed. I continue to have this concern, and I'm now worried this job may not be the right fit for you. And that's where this trainability is key, and that way you know if you've hired the right people or not, if they've got that.
And for me, I have students who meet all of these requirements. And so what I do is I make them mentors, because I'm not going to always be out there to make sure that all of this is going on. And so I've put my leaders, they may not be coordinators, but I've put my leaders on the front line, and I've made them mentors to have that communication with me and to mentor them through every single one of these.
Another great way to reward your best employees is when you're bringing in new employees. How many of you have, how many people here have 50 employees or more you're supervising? 40? 30? 20? So the trick is, if you've got a great employee, you know what, you pull them aside and go, you're doing such a fantastic with these things that I really want some of our new employees to shadow with you. We call it shadow training. It seems common sense, but I've seen it before where someone has an employee they think is absolutely terrible. They still end up having other employees shadow them to learn how to do the operational procedures. Not to point any fingers, but when I was first trained, they had me train and shadow an employee that they were trying to fire. That's not someone they wanted me to be role modeling, but they had me work with them all for 8 hours to know what the job was. Not good. You tell your great employees, you know what, you're so fantastic that I really want the other, if I could just clone you, I'd be really happy. How many of us have said that now? A lot of us probably. But I can't, since I can't clone you, what I do want to do is I want to hook up all the new employees with you and have you do little mini training sessions with them. And that way you're rewarding them, you're acknowledging them in public, and they feel better about their jobs, and they own their performance. I saw a hand.
I was just going to say, to expand on your question a little bit, it's kind of, for me, it's the difference between hiring for soft skills versus hard skills. And I think it especially becomes difficult in an entry-level position because often it is entry-level, so those people don't necessarily have the hard skills. And I really like the spirit that you guys have, because really, if you look at that, just the top one is about hard skills. And I mean, we've kind of talked about how those skills are trainable. All those other ones up there, that if somebody doesn't have that, it's really hard to train that or to teach that. So I tend to hire based on soft skills versus those hard skills, because you can teach those hard skills in most cases.
And to follow up, like when we did our performance evaluation, we broke it into 5 departmental-wide metrics that are mostly soft skills, so that they would be consistent across all the different operational units, and then task-specific or group-specific, more hard skills that are like how nerdy are you, or how technical are you, or what's your phone demeanor if you're at the help desk all the time taking phone calls 80% of the time. And that's how we kind of broke out our metrics, and we haven't actually gotten any feedback from that yet because I just sent out the first ones last week, so cross your fingers. It should work well, though. I think it's going to be an improvement.
Great. Any other questions regarding that? I was going to just dive into conflict resolution and stuff, but here's some interesting statistics. This is on here for a reason. The American Society of Quality Control recently did a study to determine why organizations lose customers. Here are the stats. 14% were dissatisfied with the product, 9% went to competition, 5% influenced by friends, 3% moved to a different area, 1% died. Unfortunately, guess what percent were turned off by the attitude of the indifference?
I don't care. I'm indifferent.
8%.
And that's big on this campus because, again, you're dealing with the same faculty and clients all the time. If 68% of the people out there are just annoyed, oh, I'm not going to call OIT. They're not going to do anything about it anyway. Great. That's not a good, that's going to live here for a while. That's not someone who's, it perpetuates itself. I like stories. When we first opened, we had a patron come in very upset about our ID policy. We require everyone to bring an ID when they come into Campus Rec. And so we told her our policy, and she ran home and ran back and pulled her passport out of her shirt, out of her bra area, and threw it on the counter and said, "Here it is." And I wiped my beep with it in front of my student. And it was that moment where I was like, we need some serious conflict resolution skills. And we got right on that into training. And so I don't know if there's any other stories. Transportation, I'm so sure, has some stories. Anybody want to share a story? Nobody else has some difficult stories in customer service? How many people know about the stabbing on campus? Yeah, okay, I won't. Well, let's just say that problematic user used our labs and the library, and it's really in our. Yep. The trick is again goes back to that. I can't. It's really important that your employees know that you support them and you're guiding them. And when we had that particular user in our labs, we had them on our radar, and our employees were told, "Call us. We want to be there for you. We are not leaving you alone in a lab at Friday night at 11 o'clock." With a user who has already grabbed one of you and taken your backpack. And, these are situations where we then address those with those students and use it as a learning opportunity to go, here's how we file a grievance at the university and file a complaint. Here's how we want you to talk to CPSO when there's a problem, and we will go with you. And again, it's not unlike when they come up with great ideas. You make sure they see that you are there for them, that you're walking the walk and not just talking the talk.
Exactly, be their support system. These are the kind of the bullet points that we train our employees on when it comes to conflict resolution. I don't know if anybody else has any others that they use when they train in conflict resolution.
We wanted to say, to expand on the last bullet point a little bit, I've worked in a lot of situations where you take ownership even if it's not your fault, if it's a team member's fault or the department's fault. We're not passing blame. You act like it was your fault and you take complete ownership for it. And I think that builds trust in the customer to your department or your area or whatever it may be.
Absolutely, because it's always a dance, and sometimes that pride just has to go, and you just have to own up to it. Absolutely, and then follow up on it. And then it's key that as their supervisor, you know that you support them, you understand that they made a mistake, you're going to follow up with them as well on that mistake. And just to kind of elaborate again on the importance of knowing who you serve in your department. For us, this is who we serve. Students, faculty, staff, alumni, and community partners. And then what I do then is I elaborate even further on these particular factors. They're coming in as parents, people with different abilities, they're culturally different, they're unfamiliar, their strengths. So going back to empathy, that plays a key role in how they interact with these individuals that come in.
And Ashley had mentioned role modeling again. In some of these situations, if you're there, you role model what the appropriate behavior is from your employees. You know, I've seen situations where someone will have a job, and they're like this. Ashley, I need you to go get my coffee. I need you to go do 18 errands today, and I'm just way too busy to do anything. And then I'm sitting over here doing, and the employee doesn't see I'm doing anything. Well, this is demoralizing. Well, that's just a student employee. They're graduating in spring. I don't care, right? So it's really important. You know, I've seen it time and time again. I've been here long enough to have enough experience to see that student employees really adopt the attitudes and the energy of the supervisors that are managing them. If you show your commitment to customer service and your commitment to communication and accommodation and those skills that you are expecting of them, if they see you doing those same things, it makes it a lot easier for you to explain to them and show them every day why those things are important. It's a lot harder to do if they don't see those things being exemplified by their managers. Their managers always have to be role modeling that behavior for them, even if your jobs are markedly different.
And just one last note, something that's always been helpful for me is always using the word because. So if they're enforcing a policy to anyone, they're going to always follow up with because. The reason why we require IDs is because of this. And so there's an educational dance from both sides. So that way the resolution to the conflict can then create an understanding on both sides. Mr. So-and-so, I will let you in this time, but you need to know this because next time we won't. So, wrapping it up, I think we're out of time. Any questions?
Thank you, everyone, for coming. We really
Thank you.
appreciate it. Thank you.